Sony's bringing back one of PS Plus's best features. We now know why God of War Ragnarok was delayed. Konami just had to issue a huge apology, and is Sony coming back and trying to kill the PS3 and Vita again? So I'm sure you guys remember that back when God of War Ragnarok was announced, the initial trailer we got had a 2021 release date at the end of it, but then Sony kind of went silent on the game until it popped back up with some gameplay and we got a new 2022 release date. And we now know the reason why, and honestly, it's a very good reason for a delay. So the guy who plays Kratos and has played Kratos since the very beginning, Christopher Judge, just revealed on Twitter that back in 2019, he needed both hips replaced and back surgery. But instead of getting someone else to do the performance capture, or God forbid, getting a new actor for Kratos to do his voice, Santa Monica Studio convinced Sony to let them wait for Christopher Judge to heal up so they could finish out the game, and that's why we're getting it in 2022. Now, honestly, I think that's a great thing overall. Just, it's really cool to see a company, someone whose literally entire existence is to just make money, kind of stepping back and saying, all right, we're gonna let this dude heal up from this surgery. We're gonna protect the integrity of one of our flagship series by showing him respect and making sure he's healthy enough to play this character and do it right. Because I'm telling you guys, 99% of the developers out there, or publishers, I guess, because you consider Sony and Santa Monica Studio as the publisher and developer, they would have just gone ahead without Christopher Judge, or the main actor of their game, or they would have found a new voice, or they would have found someone else to do the performance capture. This has happened before with huge franchises like Splinter Cell. When Splinter Cell Blacklist came out, they changed the way Sam Fisher looks and they got rid of Michael Ironside as the voice actor. Now, they brought back Michael Ironside to play Sam Fisher in Ghost Recon DLC for the last 2 games, but man, it would have been better if they had just done what Sony Santa Monica did here and brought back Michael Ironside to play the character, because we know these voices, right? They're fictional characters, they're video game characters, they're mostly CGI. Like, Christopher Judge looks nothing like Kratos, but his voice is so iconic to the character that it kind of just wouldn't feel like a God of War game without him. And when you look at what's going on in the games industry right now, I feel like Sony's catching a lot of hate lately just because of how good Game Pass has been, and because Sony's at the top, it's easy to hate on them. But then little stuff like this happens and you're like, oh yeah, this is why you guys are Sony. This is why you're at the top. This is why people are really excited for God of War. It's the little things like this that really go a long way. And really, this is just going to result in a better game overall, I think. It's not like they stopped working on the game while they were waiting for him to heal. There's a million other things they could work on while they don't have Kratos in the voice booth or in the performance capture booth that are going to be so much better in God of War Ragnarok than they would have been if the game came out in 2021, because that's just how game development works. The longer you have, generally speaking, the better the game is. When you're talking stuff that you have to wait like 13, 14 years for, like Duke Nukem Forever or something like that, that's when you start to get a little bit worried. But if you're adding on 6 months to a year of dev time, that's where it really starts to make the game better. Now, Christopher Judge has like a whole thread telling the entire story of this event, and guys, if you go read it, which you definitely should, make sure you have a tissue box handy because it's a real tearjerker. We'll have it linked down in the description. But if you want to hear every piece of God of War news as soon as it drops, make sure you subscribe and set your notifications to all, because last time I checked here on my watch, which for some reason has YouTube stats, we're not going to question that, 597% of you are not subscribed. We got to up those numbers. Or do we got to lower them? I'm not sure. Subscribe either way. While Microsoft has been taking a little bit of time off from buying up every studio in the games industry, Sony has been doing a lot of studio buying themselves, with studios like Firespray making VR games. They just got Housemarque, the people who made Returnal, and then finally they got Bluepoint, the best remakers in the entire industry. So they're buying some pretty cool stuff over at Sony, and people are naturally wondering, are they going to buy more studios? And it seems like they might, but they're not really sure just yet because of their core philosophy. So this all came up in an interview with Herman Hulst over at IGN, where he was talking about the philosophy Sony has had buying all these studios. They're not just buying them to buy them. They're really looking and seeing what these studios create, looking at the quality of their games, looking at the sales figures, and making sure that they'll fit within the PlayStation ecosystem. That's really what they've been good at, especially during the PlayStation 4 generation. And how do you look at Sony's game output and say that it hasn't paid off? Even their worst games, like quote unquote worst games, bottom out at like 8s and 9s, and they still sell millions of copies. Like, if you look at Deathloop, right, or you look at Returnal, they're not the best selling games in the entire world, but they're pulling great reviews and they're selling okay enough where Sony is looking at these games and saying, yeah, we have the best content over on PlayStation, even if it's an Xbox made game. And when you look at their strategy versus what Microsoft is doing, it's really hard to argue that they aren't making the right moves, because the bar of quality is so high on PlayStation, and a lot of the acquisitions Xbox has been making, I think 23 of them, either the games they put out aren't very good, or we just just get stuck waiting forever for their games to finally release. Ninja Theory is a great example. The first game they put out when they were acquired by Microsoft after Hellblade was this weird multiplayer third-person action game with melee combat, and they just threw it out there and it died almost immediately. It was just not a great experience. Sea of Thieves is a good example of a good game that Microsoft has put out from Rare, but it took so long to get there. That is like a No Man's Sky or Fallout 76 level turnaround story. When that game came out, it was bare bones, had really nothing to do in it. And I know Grounded's getting good reviews on Steam from Obsidian, but still, like when you look at the quality, the shape of that game, where it is when it launched, and compare that to what Sony is doing, you can't compare them. Sony stuff is just that much better. And like, I love PC, I have an Xbox Series X as well, but I'm not even gonna sit here and pretend that Sony's games just aren't of a different quality standard than what I've been seeing on Microsoft systems. But the article over on Video Game Chronicles about this interview that highlights this section of it also brings up a great point that Sony's still continuing to go outside of their own ecosystem and fund second-party studios to make exclusive games for PlayStation. I mean, recently we heard of this rumor where they're funding Kojima Productions to bring back Silent Hill, which I'd argue is just their strategy at work. They're looking at a studio who made a game that was critically acclaimed in Death Stranding and sold pretty well, not amazing, just pretty well, and they're pairing them up with an IP that will help them make a game that will sell extraordinarily well, because if you get that hype back from PT that Kojima Productions had all those years ago, and you bring back Silent Hill, which also has its own hype, it's just gonna be gangbusters when the game eventually does release. And I also think it's cool that Sony is recognizing where they're lacking a little bit, which is obviously with first-person multiplayer shooters, because they're also funding a game from Firewalk Studios, which is a studio made up of ex-Bungie devs who are making a competitive multiplayer shooter. It's like, yeah, it might not be the best game ever, but they're already covered in one department, where it feels like Microsoft is just trying to get any game they can to be a huge hit outside of stuff like Halo. Back when Control came out in 2019, there were a ton of rumors that Sony was looking at buying Remedy, and that obviously didn't work out, and it really seems like if anyone's going to buy them wholesale, it's going to be Epic Games because they're publishing their next few games. But man, if Sony could swoop in, I feel like Remedy is a studio that fits their mold perfectly. Like, Control didn't sell incredibly, it's picked up sales over time, but it's been given away enough for free at this point that I feel like it's sold what it's going to sell. And if Sony was able to bring in Remedy and really fund whatever their next thing is as a first-party game, probably not a sequel to Control, that would be so good, because people would finally see like, whoa, Remedy's making good stuff, they're getting the budget they need from Sony, and they're doing weird third-person shootery type things that we want on the PlayStation ecosystem because it fits into what we're already seeing. But besides them, honestly, Sony should just buy Konami. There isn't an IP on Konami's little shelf of awesome experiences that they've created over the years that would work well on Xbox, in my opinion. Sorry if you're an Xbox fan out there, but when you look at Metal Gear Solid, you look at Castlevania, you look at Silent Hill, all of those games had their biggest audiences on PlayStation, and if Sony's already funding second kind of first party, I don't really understand how the party system works there, but they're funding exclusive versions of these games for the PS5 already. Those are already just gonna be big on the PS5 versus the Xbox Series X. Basically what I'm saying here is that Sony really needs to look at how much money they have and how much money Konami wants for all of those IP, buy those IP, keep them exclusive, then license them back to Konami so they can keep making gambling machines. Because that's what we know Konami wants to do at the end of the day. But yeah, speaking of Konami not really doing what people want, there's this new game they put out called eFootball, which is like the next evolution of Pro Evolution Soccer, and it seems like it's actually a devolution because yeah, the game looks really bad. So basically what the whole philosophy here was that instead of using the Fox engine which powered Metal Gear Solid 5, they switched to an easier to develop on engine so that they could also release eFootball on mobile devices, have cross progression, and just monetize the hell out of this free-to-play game. It's like the most EA strategy ever, but EA actually is doing a better job with FIFA than Konami is now with PES. It's just a weird time we're living in. Now obviously people were pretty upset about this because there were a lot of Pro Evolution Soccer diehard fans who were like, it's working just fine how it is, don't screw with it. And they said, no guys, it's gonna be better, we have everything figured out here, do not worry. And now that the game is out, it turns out they had nothing figured out and they don't even know how to make people look like they do in real life. So the biggest example you've probably seen going around on Twitter is Lionel Messi. So there's a comparison shot between the EA version, which is not face scanned, it's created in the engine to just look like him from, I guess, reference photos or something like that. And then you've got the eFootball version who not only looks nothing like the actual guy, he looks like a monster. monster. He looks like one of these things you'd see show up in Gary's mod back in the day when you were just screwing around in horror maps on Steam. It's just like, if this guy was at the foot of my bed when I woke up having sleep paralysis, I don't know what I'd do. I would be terrified. And this guy is probably going to end up being one of my sleep paralysis demons now that I manifested it in real life. That is terrifying. So the weird thing about Konami is that they're a company who actually acknowledges when they do something wrong. So they came out and apologized about this, which is good. But the whole question here is, why did you release the game in this state in the first place? Like, it's not hard to compare this version of Messi to the real life Messi because you have the real life guy right there. You have all these pictures of him. You could just go to Google Images and see immediately that this creation you've conjured out of hell doesn't look anything like the actual guy. You know, they should have held the game back, worked on it, made sure it was in a good state before they launched it, instead of just sliding it out there to see what mistakes people would notice before deciding if they were going to fix them. That is such a common trend in game development this day that I'm so sick of. Games coming out half finished so that they can add features over time, and then by the time it's actually good, you feel like you beta tested the game and you don't even want to play it anymore. Now, to be fair, Konami did say initially when eFootball was announced that this new free-to-play version was going to be basically a demo at launch, but still, a demo does not constitute people not looking like the people that they should in real life. You know, like, that's not really a fair cover for them in my opinion. I hope Konami figures this out because PES was one of their biggest franchises, and ruining it as much as they did sucks for fans of that franchise. It's an easy thing to figure out. Cancel this eFootball thing, come back next year with the right version of PES that everyone wants. There, I solved your problems, Konami. Apologize a couple more times, give people some free players in this game, and then go back to the drawing board and bring it back in the way that you should have brought it out in the first place. So now we're going to take a little bit of a trip back to earlier this year when Sony decided they were going to kill the PSP, PS Vita, and PS3's digital stores. Now obviously there was a huge fan outcry because people are upset to lose the ability to purchase games on the PlayStation Vita, which, if you watch my video where I talked about it in 2021, is still a totally viable console that you can use to connect to the PlayStation Network and do pretty much everything you'd ever want to do on a handheld PlayStation. And the same goes for PS3, because Sony's backwards compatibility is so bad, there are tons and tons of games that are locked to the PS3, and taking away the main way to get them, which is to download them from the PlayStation Store for seemingly no reason, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Sony obviously relented and said, all right, we're not going to make as many changes as we initially said we were. We are going to kill off the PSP's digital store, but to be fair, it was already neutered to begin with. The Vita store got to stay open and the PS3 store got to stay open. But now it looks like they're going back to the drawing board on that decision and just making it worse once again. So starting on October 27th, you will no longer be able to add funds to your PlayStation wallet on the PS Vita or the PS3 via credit card or PayPal, which is basically like the main way people add funds to their accounts. You'll still be able to presumably do it on your PS4, PS5, and PC website version of the PlayStation Store, and then go on your PS3 and use the money you loaded in, or your PS Vita. And I'm assuming you can probably still go to like Ralph's or Kroger's or whatever it's called in your area and buy a PlayStation gift card to apply to your account. But yeah, they're putting a huge significant roadblock here to purchasing games on the actual device you're going to play them on, and no one really understands why. Now, I don't think Sony's dumb enough to already kill off these stores completely after what they went through just a few months ago, but it seems like this is the beginning of the end for the consoles. It's really looking like they're just going to slowly take away important features to wean people off of the machines before they say, yeah, we're finally going to kill support on them, just like they did with the PSP. The thing that's making me nervous about this really comes down to backwards compatibility. So like when you got the Vita, right, and they added PSP and PS1 support, if you had bought PS1 games on your PS3, you could just download them to your Vita. Or if you bought PSP games digitally on your PSP, you could just download them from your account to your Vita. If they're taking away the ability to buy PS3 or PS Vita games digitally like this, then when eventually they have the backwards compatibility digitally on the PS5 or PS6, they're probably going to make you re-buy all these games like Nintendo does with their consoles. And that sucks because I've spent a ton of money on digital PS3 games. That was my main way to play games when I was in college because they went on sale all the time if you had PS Plus, and going into the PS4 generation, it was just so much easier to get games digitally. Now obviously I'm creating a hypothetical future there, and if you look at Sony's past, they've done a good job of making sure that if you've bought a game in the past digitally, you can play it on whatever device they bring that game to. But still, you could buy digital PS2 games on the PS4, and even if you own the disc and popped it in, it's not like you got that digital version version of the PS2 game for free. You had to re-buy it just because they added trophy support. So Sony's not totally predictable in this scenario, and I just don't like that they're taking away things on the Vita specifically. That console is still viable. There were games coming out on it up until this year, and it was Sony's fault the game stopped coming to it at all. It's still a great machine. I would play it if Sony wasn't going to take away my ability to, and it really seems like they're going to eventually, which sucks. But yeah, obviously people are upset about this. I'll keep an eye on it, and if anything develops, I'll talk about it in a future video. So at the beginning of the video, I teased that one of PS Plus's best features is coming back, and that feature is game trials. So back when PS Plus launched on the PS3, Sony had this weird feature where you could try out games for up to 20 minutes. You could download them to your PS3, you could try them out, and it was usually good games like full Sony first-party titles to really see if you wanted to pick them up. And if I'm remembering correctly, just by playing those trials, they would even give you a little bit of a discount at the end of the trial on the full game. It was a really cool system that sort of went away as time went on. But now Sony's bringing that feature back on the PS5, and initially when you read it, it's super exciting because there's a lot of big games coming out, and we all know that they generally cost $70. So if you're able to try these games out before you buy them, that's just good overall. But then you look at the fine print and you're like, oh, this is done in the most Sony way possible and it sucks. So right now this is just being tested, and it's only happening over in the UK, and it only applies to 2 games, Death Stranding and Sackboy: A Big Adventure, which I'm sure by no mistake are 2 of the lowest selling games on both the PS4 and PS5. Sony obviously wants people to try these games out and enjoy them so that they'll spend money on them, which I can't fault them for that, right? They're sitting there saying we made good games, people aren't buying them because they're afraid to try them, and they're just like not as cool as the other games we've made available. Why not give people a way to try them out and see how cool they are and then spend money on them? That seems like just good business practice. But the problem is the actual amount of time you have with this trial, between 5 and 6 hours depending on the game, starts when you hit the download button from the PlayStation Store. And these are big games, and if you don't have fiber or insanely fast broadband internet, you could be waiting around half the time you have to play the game for the entire package to download. Now I'm pretty sure both of these experiences have that thing where you can download like the tutorial, try that out, or the rest of the game downloads, but still, Sony consoles are notorious for how slow they download games. Broadband internet, from what I understand, isn't as plentifully available, and especially fiber like it is here over in the UK. It just seems like the dumbest way to implement a system like this possible. Like, why can't Sony just make it so that the first time you start up the game in its free trial mode, that's when the timer starts? That honestly seems like a much easier system to implement than saying, all right, the 5 to 6 hour timer starts now, right when you hit download. Now, like I mentioned, again, this is just being tested, so by the time this feature fully rolls out, if it fully rolls out, they could figure out a way to make it so it works the right way, but still, just the fact that they're implementing it makes it seem like they're like, we want to see how far we can push this to see what people will get mad enough at for us to have to change it. Like, they automatically implemented it in the worst way possible so that they can meet us halfway on how they should actually do it right. I hate tactics like that. It's very obvious what Sony's doing here, and I don't like it. So hopefully by the time this comes out everywhere else, they figure out a way to do it right without us having to meet them in the middle, because at the end of the day, we should just have things work how they're supposed to work. Like, honestly, my ideal scenario here is that this is a feature on every PS5 game, and you can just play every PS5 game for 4 to 5 hours to decide if you like it before you download it. Now, obviously, Sony's not going to want to do that, because I'll tell you right now, the third-party publishers are never going to go for this. They're going to be like, wait, people are going to be able to play 6 hours of our game and decide they're not going to like it and then not buy it? Hell no, we're not going to do that. That is never happening. Like, Ubisoft, of all people, their games are like 400 to 500 hours long if you're lucky. They're not going to let you play 0.01% of Assassin's Creed Valhalla and then decide if you want to buy it. But Sony, on the other hand, I feel like they've got a little bit of room to play around here. They can let you play some of the first-party studios, and if they keep up their quality that they've had the last couple generations, they have every reason to let you do this, because their games are so good that if you play them, you're probably going to want to buy them. Like, if you have a passing interest enough to download a full trial of a game and get into it for 5 or 6 hours, especially with Sony games, you're probably going to stick with it and spend that money. But if you're in the UK and you want to try this out, I highly recommend checking out Death Stranding, by the way. The way to do it is to create a second account on your PS5 and then download the trial version on your main account so that the timer resets when you switch over to that second account on your PS5. Now, unfortunately, any trophies you unlock and your save will be tied to that second account, so just play a couple hours or just enough to decide whether you want the game or not, and if you do want it, immediately buy it and switch back over to your main account, and you'll just have to play the first couple hours of the game again, but man, it's mostly cutscenes, so you could probably just leave them running and go do other stuff. You could play Castlevania on your Switch or something like that, maybe make a sandwich, and then once those cutscenes are over, you could come back and pick up right where you left off. But yeah guys, that's all the PlayStation news I have for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.